All right, guys. So in this video, we're going to put it all together and actually do a full construction of a confidence interval for two samples and a difference of their population proportion. We'll call this a two sample Z interval for the difference in population proportions. And this is a confidence interval used to estimate, as you probably guessed, a difference in the proportions of successes for two populations or treatments. So we have an example here. I'll read through it and then we'll answer these questions. Patients with lower back pain are often given non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs called NSAIDs, like naproxen, to help ease their pain. Researchers wondered if taking Valium along with naproxen would affect pain relief. To find out, they recruited 112 patients with severe lower back pain and randomly assigned them to one of two treatments: naproxen and Valium, or naproxen and placebo. Just want to make a sidebar note here that this is an experiment that has random assignment to groups, not randomly selected individuals. Okay. So after 1 week, 39 of the 57 subjects who took naproxen and Valium reported reduced lower back pain, compared with 43 of the 55 subjects in the naproxen and placebo group. So for part A, we want to construct and interpret a 99% confidence interval for the difference in proportions, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So when we do this, we have to, unless it says otherwise, we have to do the four-step process for constructing a 99% confidence interval, or whatever the percent is. So the first step is the state step. So we want to, this is what you would literally write this down. 99% confidence interval for P sub NV minus P sub NP, where P sub NV is the true proportions of patients like the ones in this study who would report reduced lower back pain after taking naproxen Valium for a week, and P sub NP equals same thing in context, but it's for those taking naproxen and placebo for a week. Couple things that are important to note in this situation. Make sure you indicate, like we did here, the order of the subtraction when you define the parameter. And also, when you're defining the parameter, make sure you give the full context in as much detail as possible. Okay? I know it's long-winded. I know it involves perhaps a lot of writing, but that is the proper way to do the state step and define the parameters. Okay? So next thing we're going to do is the plan step, and this is where we state the procedure we're going to perform and check the conditions for it. So we are doing a two sample Z interval for a difference in proportions. You want to state that. That's what we're doing. The first condition is random. These were randomly assigned patients to take naproxen and Valium or naproxen and placebo. Again, you can't just put the word random in a check mark next to it. Now, something else that's important is it's not appropriate to check the 10% condition because there was not random selection of patients from a larger population. These were volunteers that were recruited, and where randomness came in was the random assignment to groups. So you would skip the 10% condition here and move on to the large counts condition. And remember, just like the random condition, you don't put a check mark and just state large counts as satisfied. You have to actually show that the number of successes and failures for each group is at least 10. So in the first group, there were 39 successes, which means 18 failures because there was 57 total. And in the second group, the numbers were 43 and 12. Those are all greater than 10. And so we can move on to the next step, which is our do step. Okay? So we will perform the calculations for that. Now, even though you can do everything on the calculator, it's highly recommended that you write down the sample proportions for each of the two samples, or in this case, each of the two groups, and then show at least a little bit of work for constructing your confidence interval. So we have our point estimate plus or minus our Z star critical value, times the standard error of the statistic. Since this is a 99% confidence interval, the corresponding Z critical value is 2.576. Then we have our standard error formula, and we get our confidence interval of negative 0.312, comma 0.116. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is the conclusion. However, had we used the calculator to get this, we could get a more accurate answer because there's different kinds of rounding going on. So we would have got negative 0.3114, comma 0.1126 or 1162 rather, if we had used a calculator. So we're going to stick with the calculator values when we get to the conclusion, which we're going to do now. So remember, when you write your when you write your conclusion for the four-step process, you have to list the confidence level, include the confidence interval, and state everything in terms of the context of the problem. So our conclude step, we are 99% confident that the interval from negative 0.3114 to 0.1162 captures the true difference, value minus placebo, in the true proportion of patients like the ones in the study who would report reduced pain after taking the Praxim and Valium versus after taking the Praxim and placebo for a week. Again, I know it's long-winded, but it's very important to give the full context and write these sentences out. Now we can move on to part B. Based on the confidence interval just found, what conclusion would you make about whether taking Valium along with naproxen affects pain relief? Justify your answer. So this conclusion is not really making a another conclusion about the effectiveness. So this is interpreting the confidence interval here. And what we would say is because the interval from negative 0.3114 to 0.1162 includes 0 as a plausible value for the difference in proportions, we don't have convincing evidence that taking Valium along with naproxen affects pain relief for patients like these. A couple things to note. We have the confidence interval. We have everything stated in context. And because we're looking for a difference, if 0 is included in our confidence interval, then it's plausible. Important we use the word plausible, not possible. Use the word plausible. It's plausible that there could be no difference between the two. So this amounts to not having convincing evidence of an effect on pain relief for patients like these. So here's how we say what it means to be 99% confident in this context. If we were to repeat the random assignment process many, many times, this is implying a long run average sort of thing, and compute a 99% confidence interval for the difference in proportions each time, about 99% of these intervals would capture the true difference, value minus placebo, in the true proportions of patients like the ones in this study who would report reduced pain after taking the Praxim with Valium versus after taking the Praxim and a placebo for a week. Notice you give the full context here. It's interpreted as a long run average, and we give the order of subtraction for the difference there. All right, guys, that wraps up this section. Hope that was helpful to you. Please do reach out if you have any questions, and take care.